Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka podcast. After a hot weekend of fights, my name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how's everything today?
Yeah, it's all good. We were just speaking off air. There was a lot of good stuff this weekend,
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah, I covered the trash. But we'll go into it. We've got. I mean, I replied to your tweet in the week. We had brilliant performance of the UFC, Bellator, one championship, Davis Garcia that we'll touch on as well,
Yeah.
and of course the big one, the influencer boxing scene. And I think it's also time to touch on and just sort of answer the question: are the UFC putting on too many events? Because we're getting some sort of, I mean, we're getting main events that we should never get, but we'll touch on that a little bit later on to sort of round the show off. But yeah, let's jump straight into the weekend that was, should we say?
Well, yeah, so there was a lot of very good this weekend. Like you said, there's one championship, UFC, Bellator. The boxing fight was just tremendous. Let's start with the OnlyFans boxing. This was Kingpyn Boxing. Tell me a little bit more about it. These were OnlyFans models and then like rappers or something?
Yeah, so they're. I mean, to be honest, I don't mind the format. It's they're doing a sort of tournament where they've got a male side and a female side, and it's the quarterfinals to that happened on Saturday,
All right.
and you've got they pick a name out of a hat kind of thing, which the sort of kickoff show, as it were, where they pick these names out of the hat. I guess it's a good sort of format. You can it's live streams so you can see that there's no corruption in it, as it were. With Bellator, they just say, okay, these are the fights. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, but how did we get to these fights? Do a big kickoff show kind of thing, and this is what this Kingpyn did. And maybe that's the social media side of boxing, maybe coming across a little bit better. But there was hype, there was a lot of essentially, from what I understand, I didn't watch too much preview about it because there's real fights this weekend to have actually got excited for. But the males were mostly YouTubers, or there was a big Brazilian rapper with 58 million Instagram followers, and there was a Polish rapper with a Polish rapper with a load of followers, and a Brazilian sort of just influencer guy with 58 million followers. And then essentially the girls, they were all OnlyFans girls, from what I understand. The skill level it's getting dangerous now, because there was an influencer show on Friday night, and I saw some sort of highlights from that, and I'm going to highlight the girls. The guys boxing wasn't any better, but this Brazilian guy who has all these followers wasn't actually, you could tell that he trained a little bit. You could tell that he'd thrown a jab. You could tell that he'd maybe sparred a minute in his life. And the guys in the main event, I think that was a rematch. Again, you could tell that these guys have at least put the hours in the gym. But some of these, and I'm going to highlight the women.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting dangerous now. There was a lady on Friday night who, she was getting backed up, and she tried to sort of push forward, and she threw a punch from, her guard wasn't up, so she threw a punch, but even if she was in range and would have landed the punch, it probably would have landed, knee height on the other girl. This is the kind of punches that were being thrown here, and she got stopped by a TKO. From what I remember, all of the fights on the Kingpyn event that I sort of, was dipping in and out of, I think all the female fights ended in the decision. It is what it is. It's 5 2-minute rounds, I believe, and the men's was 5 or 6
Sure.
3-minute rounds. So we've got that disparity even at the influencer level. But these girls were getting hit, and they were turning and sort of running away, and you could tell that some of them had never sparred a day in their life. Now, I'm not expecting these girls to go through rigorous training camps, three a days. This isn't Davis versus Garcia. But if you're getting punched and you're running away, you've never been punched in the face in your life, and it's the worrying thing is you see these guys and these girls that are doing these influencer events, and they're maybe getting the next generation into boxing. They'll then these next generation, it was on. I think there was a Misfit show on Friday night on DAZN. They can watch Davis and Garcia on DAZN and see what proper boxing is.
Yeah.
But they'll come back for the influencer boxing, and they won't come back for the real boxing. The hope is that they'll come back for the real boxing, of course. But it's just, in my opinion, it's just dangerous now. These girls, as a Danielle or Daniela Hemsley, an English girl, got punched. She was trying to defend with her hands out in front of her, and this other girl, this Brazilian girl that I'd never heard of. I mean, I'd heard of one or two people on the card as a whole, but she was punching big hooks around the guard. Then she was bringing them in, and she was coming through the guard. It was just, you could tell who had thrown a punch in their life, and who was there for a paycheck. And unfortunately, we'll see these girls again, because I think, from what I understand, the tournament format is there was 4 women's fights, so 8 women. The 4 winners go through to the semi-finals, and then the 4 losers of the bouts on Saturday night. I think they just have, a fight against each other, randomly picked out the hat. Maybe, I'm not quite sure how it works. Will I be tuning in again? I might check the results online after the fact, just out of pure interest, because this Brazilian guy with the 58 million followers, he actually looked half decent. He's a guy that, with these, they brought a massive contingent over from Brazil to London, and looking further down the line, this is the guy that could maybe fight a KSI or a Jake Paul, the upper echelons of the influencer boxing scene. But for now, I think I might stick to real combat sports for now, because it was I don't want to say, I'll say it was a painful watch.
Well, it's funny you say the upper echelon of the freak show fight scene, because freak show fights, they're not going anywhere. They've always been a part of the sport in one form or another. However, I do feel like this is very bottom of the barrel, even compared to some of the freak show fights we've seen. Like, it is insane to think that a KSI is on the good end of this kind of thing. This has to be bottom of the barrel, because some of these influencers and celebrities, they're just people. I don't mean that they're not celebrities, but I basically am saying, like, yeah, these aren't celebrities at all. These are just people who have a social media account, right? 100,000 followers. Like, you and I know people who have more followers than that, right?
Exactly. And the worrying thing is, me and you, we've got day jobs. We can't go to less, for example, on a Monday, we've got the podcast that we record this at 10 a.m. pretty much every Monday or Tuesday. I then go to my day job at 1 o'clock, and then I finish, I do 2 till 10. These influencers and these YouTube stars, these OnlyFans girls, they don't have that. They don't have a strict schedule. So they can go to the gym in the morning. They can do a podcast in the afternoon. They can go to the gym again in the evening. They can get 2 sessions in every single day, Monday to Friday, for example. None of these influencer boxers, none of the KSI, even like we said, KSI and Jake Paul are probably up at the upper echelons of the sport. They would not win an area title in boxing. They would not win. I know amateurs that would wipe the floor with these guys.
Of course.
There's probably 10 people in your local boxing gym that would slap Jake Paul and KSI all around the ring for as long as it would last. We saw, as soon as Jake Paul stepped up against Tommy Fury, you saw the levels to this game. KSI said, I fought a professional boxer who's now turned into an influencer boxer because he was so bad at professional boxing, and he took part in a tag team match of a month or 2 ago. He's now fighting a real boxer, a guy who's 10-0. However, I think 4 of his fights have come from him competing in the Dominican Republic because he was suspended for PED use. This is the kind of guys that we're giving a platform to. And, Nate Diaz, I hope that when he fights Jake Paul in August, I hope that he goes in and doesn't play the game. I hope that he goes in and just, within the first minute, just lets Jake Paul know, look, this is a boxing jab. Bang, slam the jab down the face. I don't want it to be a prolonged decision victory for Diaz. I want him to just go in there and show, look, there's levels to this game. And like I say, there's probably 10 guys in your local gym that would knock every single person out on that Kingpyn card this weekend. There's probably, a couple of guys down your local pub that would give them a decent boxing. in all seriousness, and taking into account that these guys they've got the money and they've got the time in their hands to do 2 a days, learn how to jab.
Yeah,
it was all that. A lot of the women stood square onto each other, arm punching. if you've boxed a second in your life, come on. I mean, it was getting a little bit ridiculous towards the sort of end of the fight. And it was, like you say, freak show fights aren't going anywhere. You got Rampage Jackson and you had Bob Sapp and you had
Yeah.
Dada 5000 and Kimbo Slice. But let's try, we have to cover it because, that's the sport, unfortunately. Boxing is boxing. But like I say, these guys aren't, let's not pretend that Canelo's quaking in his boots when KSI fights. Let's not pretend that Anthony Joshua is keeping an eye across this stuff, worried about his next fight. It's amateur, it's pub level stuff on a big stage. It is what it is. But finally we can put the influencer scene to bed for today's episode and crack on with the real stuff, the one championship, Bellator, UFC, and Davis and Garcia, because these were skilled fights, to say the least.
Oh man, the Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia was one of those fights where you can see these guys fight like 8 more times, and I'd be so happy with it. You have a technical, aggressive fighter versus a technical counter fighter, and then it was fireworks in there as well. And I know that it kind of became like Gervonta Davis over rounds 3 and upwards really was in control of the fight very clearly, but there were still a lot of tools that Ryan Garcia was using en route to a 7th round liver shot TKO. But what a masterclass. And Ryan Garcia is only 24 years old. Like Gervonta Davis himself is not old by any means. Let me bring it up here. How old is he? He is only
27, 28 maybe.
Yeah, he's 27, 28, something like that. Born 94. These are both young men at the top of their game at the 135-pound weight class. Absolutely love to see it. This was a really fun one. And it felt like another blockbuster event. I don't know that Gervonta is now the face of boxing over Canelo, but he is definitely now one of the biggest names in boxing due to this fight. But yeah, I'd love to see them run it back in a couple years when Ryan has developed a little bit more. But what were your thoughts on the fight and what's next for these gentlemen?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, before the fight, I was a little bit worried because we obviously had the rehydration clause. They weighed in at 136 on Friday, and then on Saturday they couldn't weigh any. Well, for the next weigh-in they couldn't weigh any more than 146. I think that's dangerous, but these rehydration clauses are what they are. I mean, we could talk for another 2 hours on this about how dangerous it is that you're drawing liquid away from the brain and whatnot on the day that you're going to fight. But we'll curb that for now and just talk about the fight itself. The first round, not an awful lot happened. I scored it for Garcia just on activity.
Yep.
The second round, I thought he'd maybe won the round, and then that counter shot. He threw the big his trademark left hook, missed, didn't get his hand up quick enough, and Gervonta Davis just showed that speed and power that he has, and scored the knockdown. Then, like you say, rounds 2, 3, 4, 5. I think Ryan Garcia had a bounce back round in round 6, but then round 7 he was landing the straight rights down the pipe well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he was a little tentative after he sort of went after Gervonta in that second round and felt the power and yes, he popped straight back up, but you don't want to keep on getting knocked down. That's a 10-8 round. That's or at worst it's a 10-9 round in favor of Davis, even if he lost the round.
But what was the weird judging? There was something weird with judging, right? This was a weird thing. It should have just been a 10-8, shouldn't it have been?
Yes. Yeah. This isn't like MMA. Any knockdown in boxing, 10-8.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, don't quote me on this, but if it's a 10, let's say, using this as an example, and let's say you thought Garcia won the round, I think it's a 9-8 round or a 10-9 round in favor of the fighter that scored the knockdown, because it's a 10-point must system. You're taking 2 points away, but you're adding another point because you think that they won the round. A la Tyson Fury in that last round against Deontay Wilder. He got knocked down, but he came back to win the round, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, the 7th, I think Garcia got. I mean, I've seen a quote. I haven't watched the post-fight presser, but that he said that he got bored in there, so he went after Tank. That's worrying because I don't want a fighter to say that he's getting bored in there, which is why he went after his opponent. Either stick to the game plan of going after your opponent from minute 1, or scale it back, win on points, progress on. Beautiful liver shot. I didn't see it coming. I thought that he'd maybe hurt his shoulder or something, because it was started exchanging the clinch, and you saw him back up, and then you saw him take a knee, and I thought maybe he'd hurt a shoulder in that. I literally I didn't even see Tank throw the liver shot, and then obviously the replays and whatnot, we see that it didn't even seem like a liver shot with any great power. But when you've got the accuracy and you've obviously got the natural power that Tank has, you know, it reminds me of Donald Cerrone versus RDA. It reminds me of Caitlin Chikagian versus Jessica Andrade. You know, you don't have to land these massive swinging shots out of nowhere, the Francis Ngannou uppercut type of shots. You don't have to land them to the liver. It just shuts the body down. And with almost all liver shots, it's not instant. It's liver shot, take a second, body shut down. And you saw that with Ryan Garcia. You know, they had that little exchange in the middle of the ring. He took a few steps back. Tank knew that he'd caught him. He smiled at him. Ryan Garcia winced, takes the knee, isn't able to make the 10 count. But yeah, touching on your point, I agree with you. I don't think Ryan's now Tank is now the face of boxing. He's certainly the face of the lower weight divisions. Canelo's still the face of boxing. If he gets through John Ryder in a week's time, I think he will. You know, the misdemeanors outside of the ring for Tank play against him, in my opinion. But you know, we've seen Mike Tyson is the face of boxing for many years, and at the end of the day, Mike Tyson spent a long time in prison. So you know, it is what it is. Great, 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 great fight, and
yeah,
they made the fight, which is the most important thing. Boxing doesn't do this. Usyk Fury, when are they fight? But they're not.
Man, Fury,
Garcia, Davis.
Who's
God.
Fury just confirmed to fight? It was like the most
Andy Ruiz, I believe.
I'm whelmed. I'm whelmed by this news. This is sucks. This, of all the options, that one's the lamest. Andy Ruiz really fails upwards, doesn't he?
I mean, fair play to Andy Ruiz. You know, he's
yeah.
he's getting the late notice against Joshua. He gets the rematch against Joshua that he completely blows. He's got the fight against Luis Ortiz. I think he had Chris Arreola in there as well. Now he's fighting Fury. And from what I understand, that fight's going to be in Saudi Arabia. It's the same night as the UFC is confirmed to be back in London.
Yeah.
So they're not going to put two combat sports shows on the same night, both in London. It would be, you know, there's no chance. So the UFC returned to the O2, but, you know, Fury should be selling out Wembley. He's not. He's going to be selling out probably the Jeddah Stadium or whatever they do, whatever they fight in Saudi Arabia. But, you know, that's not what fans want to see. No one cares about that fight. And it's probably going to be Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois again. It's an entertaining fight. Yeah. Dubois deserves a shot, but not before Usyk and Fury fight. It is what it is, you know. Thank God we got Davis versus Garcia, because that's a fight that needed to be made at the lower weight classes, and they made it.
And it ended brilliantly. Like you said, the body shot you really couldn't see until the replay, and then when you saw it was just amazing. I forget who was talking about it, but someone said, like, if you get hit in the liver flush, it is impossible to recover within 10 seconds. Like, even at 12 seconds, he was getting up. But I think someone had a presentation about it with one of the boxing commissions. So just like it's just never happened if you get hit there. But yeah, great fight. How about a little bit of Patchy mix? Wins the Grand Prix, wins the undisputed Bellator title, walks away with $1 million with a knee in the first, this was a minute and a half into the first round. And he beat Magomedov before this. He beat Kyoji Horiguchi ahead of this. He beat James Gallagher ahead of this. What the hell do we have to say about Patchy Mix at this point?
I mean, you've just, you reeled off the names that he's beaten before this. I'm not afraid to say that, you know, and I'll hold my hands up and I'll apologize to Patchy Mix because I know that he watches.
Yeah, that's right.
I did not see him winning the tournament. I don't think I picked him for a single fight in on our staff picks. I don't think I picked Horiguchi, I picked Magomedov, and I picked Rufian Stotts. Yeah. And he's surprised me time after time after time. This one at the weekend was effortless. I know it sounds ridiculous, but he just lifted the knee up, caught Rufian Stotts, and knocked him cold. Not knocked him out and TKO'd him. That's a knockout. That's not a TKO. That's not a technical knockout. The ref didn't jump in because Rufian Stotts was unable to defend himself.
Yeah.
He couldn't defend himself. He was out cold. And like I say, it was effortless. Just little work, lifts the knee up, smashed Rufian Stotts on. One of the best timed shots I think we've seen. I mean, for me, so far, it's knockout of the year. Yeah. It's going to be a tough one to beat. And you look, he lost a decision to Juan Archuleta on his return to Bellator after obviously having the rising fight.
Yeah.
But if you look, you look at his Bellator record, he's got a submission win over Ricky Banderas. He's then got two submission wins, one in Bellator, one in Rising. He loses a unanimous decision to Juan Archuleta. He then chokes out Albert Moraes, chokes out James Gallagher, goes the distance with Horiguchi and outpoints him, chokes out Magomedov, and now knocks out Ruffian Stotts. I don't know what's next for Patchy Mix, but I want to see him. I want to see him in the UFC. I know, for me, you've got 2 Bellator events back to back, and of which none really. I didn't care about any of them. To be honest, as bad as it sounds, I just didn't. I didn't. There was no hype about these ones. But if you look, if you look at the skill and where Patchy Mix has come from, he's 29, so he's still arguably yet to meet his peak. Phenomenal performance. You got to feel for Ruffian Stotts. He got the big win in the sort of grudge match against Danny Sabatello, who obviously got a good win on the night before, Bellator 294. For me, I wouldn't mind a rematch in this one. But realistically, Patchy Mix, without a doubt, $1 million man, phenomenal performance, phenomenal knockout. And I'm just still, I'm still kind of in shock at just how easy it was. He just lifted that knee up. Obviously, by no means am I saying it's an easy technique, but Patchy Mix made that look easy. Just lifted the knee up, bang, knockout, happy days.
Absolutely. And I think, man, he, like you said, we're saying we didn't pick him to win any fight, but I think if we made a top 4 of this tournament, you can probably go back to our show when they announced this. Patchy Mix wasn't even our top 4, I would imagine, in this tournament, right?
No, without a doubt.
Yeah. Even like a Danny Sabatello, someone like that, a Brent Jones. But now I assume he's going to fight Sergio Pettis, who's still holding the title, or how does this work? What is Bellator doing?
I have no idea, because from what I believe, obviously Sergio Pettis is fighting Pitbull for.
Oh, it's like a champ versus champ thing. Okay.
For the belt, but that
okay.
makes me question who's the 135-pound champion, because if the Bellator Bantamweight Championship is on the line, Sergio Pettis versus Patricio Pitbull, this goes down middle of June.
But as you can see on Wikipedia, Patchy Mix is listed as the Bellator champion as well.
Patchy, yeah, because you got to kind of beat the man to be the man. Ruffian Stotts was the champion. The Bellator poster shows Ruffian Stotts with a belt around his waist. Yeah. Patchy Mix then had the belt around his waist on Saturday night. This is why Bellator is shit.
You want to spike the football moment. You want to make moments in sports history, and we're over here being like, "That's an interim title." You want here?
I don't know. Is it an interim title? Because
I don't know.
It's the Bellator Bantamweight Grand Prix for an interim belt. I don't think that they would have. I don't want to say. Okay, I take back saying Bellator is shit, because we have a good relationship with Bellator. They're not shit. They're just confusing. They shouldn't be. We're sat here on a Monday. We're in the industry. I can't go onto any social media of mine without MMA content. Yeah. And I don't know who the Bellator champion is. This is supposedly the second best promotion in the world. And I couldn't tell you their bantamweight champion. I could tell you who it's between. It's definitely between Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix. Now, that makes me question why they bothered booking Sergio Pettis a fight against Patricio Pitbull, and why they wouldn't just wait until this fight concluded and then do Sergio Pettis versus, as it turns out, Patchy Mix or Ruffian Stotts, had it have been. But I don't know. I don't know.
I'm not an expert here, but it looks like Ruffian Stotts had one defense of his interim title, which just adds more questions to like, what the hell is going on here? This is so.
I just can't understand why you'd have a tournament for an interim belt when Sergio Pettis has been out for so long. I can't remember the last time. Has Sergio Pettis made a defense of his Bellator title yet, or was his last fight? His last fight was December 2021 against Horiguchi, where he defended the belt.
Yeah. Oh, okay. He defended the belt. Okay.
From what I understand, I thought he was stripped. He was for a second, so as per Wikipedia, was forced to pull out of the event, sustaining injury that required surgery. He's supposed to be fighting Ruffian Stotts, so maybe Ruffian Stotts then went on to compete for the interim title.
Sure.
But what I will say is, why not just strip him of the belt? On the Bellator official website, it does have Ruffian Stotts as the interim champion. But I don't think Sergio Pettis would have kicked up too much of a fuss if he was stripped of the belt for the good of the division.
He's,
Having a tournament, and then he faces the winner without question.
I know, but that's not what we're about here. Everyone gets a
As we
belt.
always say, Bellator gonna Bellator.
Let's just make it as weird as possible. Let's move forward. We did have some just a masterclass, just unexpected. Jonathan Haggerty knocked out Nong-O in the first round, a Muay Thai match. Jonathan Haggerty's looked sharp. He looked flawless in this fight, and he's young, at 26 years old. He's still developing the Muay Thai game and getting better overall. And Nong-O was on like a 7-fight title win streak, with most of those coming by via knockout. People don't do this. Like this is an insane thing that has happened. Jonathan Haggerty looked flawless in there. What were your impressions? What were your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think it's his sort of Conor McGregor moment, and there's kind of some comparisons that you can pull between the two guys, Nong-O on a 5-year undefeated streak, Jose Aldo on a 10-year undefeated streak, goes in there and just blitzes through his opponent. So did Conor McGregor. I mean, it was spiteful from Jonathan Haggerty. It wasn't, he didn't, again, like we said with Patchy Mix, he didn't TKO his man. He knocked him down. I think there were 2 knockdowns, and then the final knockdown that left absolutely no questions as to the sort of outcome of that one. And for me, I think Haggerty now, I don't know what's next for him, but I'm excited for it. A friend of mine suggested a Liam Harrison fight.
Yeah,
imagine that would be a great fight. I don't think Liam Harrison gets that fight, but he's got 2 losses against Rodtang. Do they make that? I don't think so. I think we're probably looking at the rematch, but realistically, I think we just have to, rather than looking ahead, just look at the performance that was. Phenomenal performance.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I think Liam Harrison probably needs to recover a little bit more, but that's kind of the right fight in that division, in that weight category, and it would be cool to see. But yeah, just what's the future of Jonathan Haggerty? Young man, lots of potential. Like, it's unreal to see him do this against such a game veteran like that. If you caught 4 main events this weekend, I think it was a pretty good weekend, and the UFC capped it off with an Apex card, which is all right, but really the story is of the heavyweight division's new juggernaut. Sergei Pavlovich makes it 6 knockouts in a row against ranked, meaningful competition. This weekend, he made it look easy against Curtis Blaydes. What were your thoughts on this one, Sergei Pavlovich?
I mean, the fight card itself was a tough watch for me. I'll be honest, I wasn't interested in an awful lot of fights on that card. I think Bruno Silva had a good performance. The Bobby Green controversy with the headbutt, or the clash of heads, I should say. But thank God for Sergei Pavlovich, because he really made this card what it was. We had a lot of decisions on this card. We had a lot of wrestle heavy. You're looking down the card, you think Muhammad Usman versus Junior Taffa, that's going to be an absolute war. One guy's going out under 5 minutes. And what we saw was Usman lie on Taffa for a prolonged period of time. But thank goodness for Sergei Pavlovich. And it wasn't like he just went in there and one punch knockout Curtis Blaydes. It wasn't like he went in there and just, caught Curtis Blaydes. From minute 1 to minute 3 minute and to 3 minutes and 8 seconds when the knockout came, when the finish came, he battered Curtis Blaydes. But we could see, we got to see that he could take a shot.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
The jab of Pavlovich, every time it landed, it was knocking Curtis Blaydes back. It was forcing Curtis Blaydes to reset. We saw his takedown defense a little bit because Curtis Blaydes did shoot for a shot, and it was, it wasn't like it was a desperation shot. Sergei Pavlovich shot the right hand. Curtis Blaydes kind of just didn't even try and get out of the way. He just kind of level changed onto it, and Pavlovich, we saw Pavlovich instantly bang, hips back, forearm under the arm of Curtis Blaydes, and just shrugged him off with ease. This is Curtis Blaydes. This isn't a Cyril Gane type takedown. This is a Curtis Blaydes who is, I was talking last week about maybe being the best wrestler in the heavyweight division behind maybe John Jones. But, he's got the evidence to say that he's the best wrestler in the division. We've seen him out wrestle Jairzinho Rosenstruck. We've seen him out wrestle Alexander Volkov. We've seen him out wrestle, plenty of guys. And we've seen him strike, knocked out Chris Daukaus, not last time. Obviously, the knee injury to Tom Aspinall was the last time, but just before that, knocked out Chris Daukaus on the feet. Curtis Blaydes only loses to the best. We look down his record now. He's got 3 losses on it. 2 to Francis Ngannou, both via stoppage. Yep. No shame in that. Nope. And 1 to Derek Lewis, who caught, if Derek Lewis lands on your chin, you're going out. Simple as. And now Sergei Pavlovich has gone in. I think that's the most normal anyone's ever made Curtis Blaydes look. And for me, Curtis Blaydes is abnormal. He shouldn't, he's a quick heavyweight. He's got phenomenal wrestling. He's got a phenomenal gas tank for the size that he is. Pavlovich just goes in there and just dominates from start to finish. Like I say, the jab, the hooks that are landing, the strange sort of uppercut hook that he throws that seems to land every time. He's clearly got the takedown defense. From what I understand, he's got a foundation in Greco-Roman wrestling. So, this guy is a serious, serious problem. And if Stipe doesn't get the next shot at John Jones, throw Sergei Pavlovich straight in there. And I don't want to see any late notice stuff. Realistically, this guy is what did he weigh in for this one? 265. Oh, so 260.5. He's a proper heavyweight. Cyril Gane could make 205, I think, with a bit of dieting and getting down, a bit of a nasty weight cut. You're cutting off limbs of Sergei Pavlovich to make 205. He is, without doubt, a bona fide heavyweight, and without doubt, more than deserving of a UFC title shot. I'm so excited for the chance for the opportunity of Sergei Pavlovich. He's already had the setback against Alistair Overeem, and I'm so excited. Like you say, 6 first-round KOs. Yeah. Each of which has been a tougher competition than the next. You come in against Alistair Overeem and he just got exposed. He just got ground and pounded out and he was done. Yeah. But it's been a steady rise. One contender, better contender, top, fringe top 10, top 15 guy, fringe top 10 guy, top 5 guy, title eliminator, title shot. Phenomenal stuff from the, and you got to take your hat off to the UFC for actually putting that fight on, putting Sergei Pavlovich through that kind of, murderer's row. Let's just say that he's lucky that, I think, from what I understand, he's lucky that he had visa issues because Tom Aspinall would have wiped the floor with him. But maybe that's a fight we'll see further down the line. But no, this weekend's all about Sergei Pavlovich and his deserving title shot next.
I completely co-sign with you, but there's no rush on this title shot either. He's only 30 years old. The top of the heavyweight division is nothing but old guys. John Jones and Stipe Miocic will be retired within the next 24 months, and Sergei Pavlovich will still not even be in his prime at that point, right?
It's ridiculous. It's crazy, and I think we're finally seeing the new era of heavyweight contenders. You got Sergei Pavlovich, you've got Tom Aspinall. Cyril Gane, I think, Curtis still Blaydes in there. Curtis Blaydes is still in there. This loss doesn't send him too far backwards. Yep. Hypothetically speaking, he could fight Tai Tuivasa next, which is a really good stylistic matchup for him. He could fight Cyril Gane next, which again is quite a good stylistic matchup for him. We've gone are the days where we're seeing Stipe and DC just share the belt essentially. Which, it's a strange era for the UFC, but, it is what it is. What I'm really gutted about, I would have loved to see Sergei Pavlovich versus Francis Ngannou.
I know. But
maybe one day down the line we see that. Who knows? But, like I say, Sergei Pavlovich, his rise to the title, this is what we want to see. Yep. Give him he came into the UFC at what? I think 15. No, he came into the UFC at 11-0. Give him Alistair Overeem on the back end of his career. Okay, he failed at that. But then, okay, let's drop down in competition. Marcelo Gome, Maurice Green. I'm not going to try and butcher his name, but Shamil, Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa, Curtis Blaydes. This is how contenders should be built. Take note, everybody, because you don't want to come into the UFC and fight lesser known, lesser ranked guys if you're getting finishes and whatnot. Yep. you want to be doing what Sergei Pavlovich is doing, and look at how it's turned out for him. He's beaten everyone in his path. He hasn't seen a second round since 2017 when he went to a unanimous decision, 5-round unanimous decision. I think he's only seen the judges' scorecards a number of times, 3 times, I think. But, first round knockout, first round knockout, first round knockout, all of his knockouts. And if a fight with featuring Sergei Pavlovich hasn't gone to decision, it's ended in his favor in the first round by that one against Alistair Overeem.
Yeah.
And he's slowly becoming one of my favorite fighters to watch, because that it's not going to be a boring fight. I'm extremely excited for the future of Sergei Pavlovich. And like you say, he's 30 years old.
Yeah.
This guy has got another potential 8 to 10 years in the division. Quality.
Man, it's just insane. But here's the thing, and I know we wanted to touch on this, so this is a perfect setup of you really wanted to have a moment where he's crowning in front of an audience. He's beating a top 3 opponent via first round knockout. You really wanted that moment. You wanted the photos, you wanted the video, the crowd going wild. The UFC put it in the fucking Apex. What the hell? What the heck is this? Nobody likes this. It's not COVID anymore. Get out of the Apex. Put it in some whatever casino, 5,000 people. It doesn't matter. You'll sell it out. What is going on? What is this?
We're quite simply put, we're putting on too many events. As I say, the UFC are putting on too many events. Now, they have saved the UFC 288 card by putting Muhammad versus Burns on that card.
Because
that's a phenomenal fight. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that card needed it, because there's no guarantee that Henry Cejudo makes weight. He hasn't made weight for 3 years.
Yep.
He blew all the way up. He's now obviously cutting all the way down. I don't have any doubt that Henry Cejudo is an absolute professional, will make the weight, but there's no guarantees in this. They've then re-announced Oliveira versus Dariush, not as a 5-round main event in an Apex, but as the co-main event for the UFC 289 card in Canada, I believe. I think that's the Canadian card, where they've announced the trilogy that no one asked for between Nunes and Pena, but that's an argument for another day. But they've also announced Vettori versus Cannonier as a 5-round main event. They've also announced Strickland versus Magomedov as a 5-round main event. They've also announced they confirmed Josh Emmett versus Topuria as a 5-round main event. But then you've got Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis in what is a title eliminator, without a doubt a title eliminator.
Yeah.
It's just been added to the UFC 290 card.
It's a 3-rounder.
You've got Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner, 2 fighters that will bring the action from start to finish, just on the UFC 290 card. I think there's another big fight announcement. I'm just looking through it now. There's another huge fight announcement that is just added to a card. Now, say what you will, but for me, I would rather have less UFC events. Oh, of course, Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena.
Great fight. Phenomenal
fight. Just added to the UFC 290 card. Now, that UFC 290 card is looking like we're trending towards maybe the best fight card in
it's looking good.
Recent times. You've got the main event between Volk and Rodriguez, co-main event between Brandon Moreno and Pantoja. We've got Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis, Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price, Jalen Turner versus Dan Hooker. Of course, the card isn't official yet, but I saw Bo Nickel versus Trezor Gore on the main card. Get that on the prelims. That on the prelims. Devison Figueiredo versus Manuel Cap, and Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena. They're just the fights that were announced.
Yeah.
That's only 8 fights. We're usually used to a 14 to 16 fight card. That's going to be the best card of the year without a doubt. But what I will say is that I want to see more events like this and less events like Sean Strickland headlining against a 1-0 guy. I think he's 1-0 in the UFC. Like I said earlier, me and you are in the sport. I spend most of my day reading about sport. I watch multiple fights a day
Yep.
often. I hadn't heard of Abbas Magomedov.
I know. I know.
He's 1-0 in the UFC, and his debut lasted 19 seconds.
Yep.
I don't get it. I cannot understand why this fight is going ahead. You know, Sean Strickland wants to stay active. He's clearly. I think this is just Sean Strickland accepting the fact that he's never going to be a middleweight contender, because why else would you fight outside of the rankings? We also that's the other main event: Brendan Allen versus Jacko Manson. That's not a main event fight, I'm afraid. Maybe Brendan Allen's being sort of awarded because he took the main event on short notice, but that didn't against Andre Muniz a few weeks ago. But
Yeah.
that doesn't, for me, Sean Strickland's never fought Derek Brunson. Sean Strickland's never fought Roman Dolodzi. He's never fought Calvin Gastelum. He's never fought, well, he's fought Brendan Allen, and there's actually a storyline behind that one. So make that fight. Why he's fighting outside of the division against a guy that's 1-0 in the UFC. Yes, he's got a phenomenal record behind him, 25, 4-1. I think he's a former KSW champion. Sorry, he's fought in KSW. He's fought in the PFL.
Yeah.
But what are we doing? Why is this warranting a main event slot? Sean Strickland is not a fun fighter, I'm afraid. Newsflash, but he's not a fun fighter.
No.
This is set to take place the 1st of July. As of yet, you've got Sean Strickland versus Magomedov, Ariane Lipski versus Melissa Gatto, and Joe Anderson Brito versus Kushian Above.
Some person.
I'm more interested in Ariane Lipski versus Melissa Gatto than I am against Sean Strickland versus Abbas Magomedov. That fight is curtain jerker on UFC 290.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that Sean Strickland's got a number next to his name. For me, I want to see considerably less UFC cards if this is the caliber of card that we're getting put out. And the same with this weekend. We'll go ahead now to. Well, I mean, this past weekend, the card wasn't great.
Let me touch on that a little bit. Of like, if half the guys, and like you said, if we are in the industry talking about fighting, living and fighting all day long, and half of the people don't have Wikipedia pages, and we don't know half the people on the card, this is really not impressive work from the UFC. And this weekend we're back in the UFC Apex again, and that sucks because it's such a good fight in the main event. Everything after that is just passable. However, I don't see the pattern changing, and the reason is because the UFC has been able to offer ESPN 8 hours of live sports at almost no cost. It doesn't cost anything to produce a UFC event. The biggest cost is fighters being paid because we put it in the UFC Apex. And we know that fighters aren't an expensive thing. So we're talking about, let's say you have 4 hours on ESPN. How much sponsorships is 4 hours worth on live ESPN? What are we talking, like $2 million there? And you're going to pay the fighters a total of $100,000. So you're paying $100,000 for $2 million of sponsorships. And on top of that, I feel like at the crux of all of this, not just sponsors, it's not people like us who are really watching the UFC anymore. It's gambling. It is 100% gambling.
Sure.
The biggest sponsors of the UFC right now are major gambling websites. This was the only thing going on during COVID. But those have to be the only people who are watching 16 fights from the UFC Apex of people who are basically unknown, right? Like there's no other people who are benefiting or enjoying the UFC at this point. And because of it, I don't think the ratings on a UFC card can be that good when it's this quality. But it doesn't matter because the sponsors and ESPN are quite happy because they can have 8 hours of sponsorships and 8 hours of gambling going on. So I think the UFC's business model, it's not fun, it's not growing, it's not particularly interesting, but it sure makes money, doesn't it?
Without a doubt. And like you say, I mean, I very rarely, I mean, I almost never watch a card live from start to finish because of where we are timed.
Yeah.
I'll maybe catch 4 or 5 fights on the prelims, go to bed and catch the rest of the card when I wake up without knowing the result. I watched UFC 286, Leon Edwards Usman 3. I watched that from start to finish. Veronica Macedo versus the Juliana Miller. First fight, I was at my friend's house. I watched that from start to finish. I didn't know, I knew all the fighters on that card because I'd done my research. beforehand. Obviously I'm around Cage Warriors as through osmosis and being in the UK.
Yeah.
But that was still that was a long watch. That was a pay-per-view. You had extremely competitive fights to look forward to, and that was a long watch.
Mm-hmm.
This past weekend's card and this weekend's card coming. I didn't watch all the fights on this past weekend's card, and I will not watch all the fights on this upcoming
No,
weekend's card
no.
because I haven't heard of a lot of there's a 4-0 Russian girl called Russian Ronda. She's called Russian Ronda, and she's 1-1 in her last two fights. You've got, our friend Melissa Mullins is, I think, 6-0, 7-0. She hasn't got a shot in the UFC yet, but Russian Ronda, who's 1-1 in her last two, has got a shot.
Yep.
And then you've got but she's further up the card than Jamie Lynn Horth, who 5-0, I think LFA champion or LFA. Yeah, so she just won the excuse me, she just won the flyweight, or in her last fight she won the vacant flyweight title. She was meant to compete in December of last year, but she didn't. She's debuting against Hayley Cowan, who herself, realistically, she was 1-1 in her last two. She won a split decision on the Contender Series, but because of maybe how she looks, I don't want to say, but
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
who else has got a split decision win on the Contender Series? And unless it's a fight of the night, got a contract to the UFC.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen because you have to really show that you're about that life kind of thing. You've got a guy on here making his UFC debut in Trey Waters. I think he's making a late notice, but he's 1-1 in his last two and lost on the Contender Series. There's plenty of people on this card that realistically, you've got someone on the main card, Fernando Padilla, making his UFC debut on a main card. Yes, it's a fight night show. Yes, it's not a pay-per-view.
But
he's 4-3 in his last 7.
yeah. Why is he on a UFC main card?
And this guy's on a main card.
I'll throw another.
And hasn't fought since May of 2021.
And I'll throw one more thing at you. So UFC in 2016 was what, $4 billion? Now we're in 2023. UFC is worth $12 billion, something like that. Is not because of stars. It's not because of quality of events. It's just purely due to sponsorships, and gambling is behind the biggest driver of this, because you can see on the quality we're talking about here. A guy who's debuting in the UFC is on the main card on ESPN. People aren't tuning in for this guy, except gamblers. The biggest growth push in the UFC's history is just due to gambling, I would bet.
For sure. And the two guys in the main event, Song Yadong versus Ricky Simone, it's a great fight. It's a great main event. But we have to question, is it a main event? Because it was only good enough for the co-main event a week ago until they lost the main event, the original main event for this fight, for this card. Yeah. So, I hope they're getting weighed in pretty handily, because they've saved this card. Because Borralho versus Mikhail Olinjacek, butchered it, but you know who I mean, the Lord or whatever he calls himself. That's not a main event fight in any way, shape, or form. That's not even a co-main event. It shouldn't, in my opinion, it's borderline main card event. It doesn't get on a pay-per-view. None of these fights get on a pay-per-view aside from the main event, in my opinion.
Yep.
You've got Charles Johnson competing on this card. Phenomenal.
We like him. Friend of the show. Yeah.
But why is he fighting so far down on the prelims in what can be a competitive fight against Cody Durden?
Yeah, I know. That's a good fight there. You've
got a 13-4 guy in Charles Johnson and a 14-4 guy in Cody Durden. Pretty similar experience. Both got pretty similar sort of regional scene experience and UFC experience. Why are we not bumping that up to the main card? And I can't understand. Jake Collier at heavyweight is all I need to put as far as this fight. You got Rodolfo Vieira on the card, who.
That's good. That's fine.
Yeah. He's fine, but again, why is he on the main card? He's 1-2 in his last 3 fights. fighting a guy that's 2-2 in his last 3 fights, including a loss to Mikhail Olenjacek or again, Lord. But for me, even the main event, it's a great main event. It's potentially it has got big ranking implications.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a main event. If it was only good enough for co-main event the week before,
Yeah.
they've panicked and given it the main event the week after because they lost a fight card. They've weakened the card to make another card, to save another card. But in my opinion, it's not a main event fight.
But let's circle back to it. It's a great fight though.
It's
That's a
a
great
phenomenal fight. I'm so excited for it. This is the thing. This is the thing. You could even take a couple of the fights off the UFC 288 card and add them to this one. Drew Dober versus Matt Ravola. That's on the prelims of UFC 288. Really fun fight. Two guys that always come to fight for as long as the fight lasts. Marino Rodriguez versus Jandiroba. Why that's a prelim fight? Marino Rodriguez has lost one fight to Amanda Lemos. And Jandiroba, I think she's on a bit of a strange run of winning a few, losing a few, winning a few, losing a few.
Mm-hmm.
You got Masvidal Evila versus Bryce Mitchell on late notice for that card. These fights could come across to this UFC Fight Night card to make it better, or we could just, spread these Fight Night. This for me, this Fight Night card doesn't have to happen, but it does have ranking implications. I am excited for the fight itself because Song Yadong versus Ricky Simone is a really big fight, really good fight. Song Yadong's second straight main event, first time we've seen Ricky Simone compete across 5 rounds. Yeah. But I'm not even convinced that I think it's the best fight this weekend, but closely followed by Reece McKee versus Jim Warhead in Cage Warriors in Dublin.
That is a better fight. That's genuinely, I mean, that's a great fight right there, but that's better than most of the stuff on this UFC Apex card.
And these are two guys that couldn't cut it in the UFC. Both went 0-2. So it says that's all you really need to know.
Yeah. But no, I completely co-sign with you. I'm on board with everything that you're saying there. There's just far too many UFC events, uninteresting cards, uninteresting events. And it's almost the opposite of like, if you had you're training your audience like us to not tune in for most of this. There's just no reason to. We know what the numbers are on this show. We know people don't care about this. You know what I mean? Most of the stuff people don't care about. So even the main event people will tune in for, and that's more than enough. But
for sure. And this time next week we'll break it down. We'll break down the main event and we'll look ahead to UFC 288. But I can tell you now that most of the show will be UFC 288. It's not going to be a huge. We'll break down the main event and any other talking points on the undercard. But I'm not gonna. I can't go into any detail because we've got one Fight Night 10 to talk about. We've got UFC 288. We've got Canelo returning. We've got other fights to focus on. So that's going to be next week's show, and I'm looking forward to it already.
Absolutely. Anything else we need to cover up before we head on out of here?
I don't think so. I think we've got it. I've got a preview for the Cage Warriors main event coming out later this week, so keep an eye out on the site for that. But awesome. I'm just excited for this time next week when we're breaking down some deserving pay-per-view fights.
Awesome stuff, Frazer. Thank you so much for your time. Links will be down below for all this stuff, including a sponsorship link. Have a good weekend, folks.
Take it easy.